Three, two, oh, marker.
Yay!
Crossfire with Matthew and Fowler. Understory Hydra for skies. Shira, Calpurnia. Step forth, solve this crimes.
Well, let me officially say welcome. It's lovely to meet you, Matt. Matthew or Matt?
Uh, it can be. It's usually Matthew, but it can be either. I don't
Yeah.
mind.
Well, yeah. So, welcome to Mirror Manga's Grimdark Buddies YouTube channel. So, I've got
Very
Matthew
well.
Farrow with me today, the creator of Shira Calpurnia
There she is.
Omnibus. So this book came to my attention because I did an interview with Chris Rate, all around his Bloodlines Warhammer 40K crime book.
Right.
And I was waxing lyrical about how I loved the world building, and he said, "Well, let me tell you, if you
Oh, that
want to
was
talk about world building, need to read Matthew Farah."
very kind of him.
Yeah, I talk quite often to Dan Abnett, everybody's favorite Warhammer Father Christmas,
Absolutely.
who also had great things to say about you. So thank you for coming on my channel and letting me talk to you.
Thank you for inviting me.
The first in this trilogy, and it's called Crossfire. Yay, there she is. Gorgeous, gorgeous.
So this is the original Clint Langley covers. Do you know what's different about it?
What language is that?
I'm not going to try the Czech pronunciation because I'm sure I would butcher it. But yeah, an outfit called Polaris had some sort of licensing with Black Library back in the day. So yes, I got a Czech language translation of all three books. I don't think I did an omnibus, but very
Fabulous.
strange experience holding something in your hand that has my name on it that I know I wrote, but that I cannot read.
Love this. Well, this is just the global nature. This is how far the grimdark spreads.
Yes,
Um,
yes, that's right.
so this book came out in 2003, and
Yes.
I was going to do the thing where I look back and say, well, in the UK at this time, this stuff was happening, and I was like, gosh, that's too depressing. But could you take us back in time? And I guess the first thing I ask, like Black Library authors, is what was your experience, like your first experiences of Warhammer? How did you hear about this hobby? Yeah.
Okay, I had been aware of it for a very long time. I remember buying a copy of the square cardboard box set of Warhammer: A Game of Fantasy Battles. And this is not the giant one with the plastic miniatures. This was the one that was about that big. It was had three books in it. It had little punch out stand up cardboard figures to
Wow.
play the Magnificent Sven scenario. Um, and never actually got to play it, but read the books. Fell away from it for a while because I was my gaming through school and university was mostly
Mm.
role playing, which didn't need as much of an investment. Started to notice the actual Games Workshop shop fronts appearing in places around Australia. Once I once I graduated and I was working with a guy who was very into Blood Bowl. Not
Okay.
really a nerd by most other counts. I think he was into it because it was like a sporty thing. And yeah, he and I said, oh yeah, I know the miniatures thing, and I know but I'm not very familiar. I sort of know a bit about Warhammer, but ended up going around learning Blood Bowl,
Wow.
having a this was the second edition of the game, having a lot of fun with that. My friend and I started to buy White Dwarf magazine, and I
Yeah.
had a few issues of that kicking around back when it was a general purpose gaming zine, not just
Mm.
the Games Workshop house organ. And we started buying it for the Blood Bowl articles for the tactics and so forth, and started just because they were there reading some of the other material,
Mm.
and realizing how much of its own thing sort of Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 had had evolved into, and seeing the art and the references, reading a battle report which talked about, a Space Marine commander consulting the Imperial Tarot and praying in the Reclusiam before the battle. It's like, hang on, this is a different vibe.
Yeah.
Seeing pictures, and there was some miniatures arrayed around a bit of terrain. It was the new fancy miniatures that were just about to be released, and seeing the caption, it was a mob of orc knobs clash with Eldar striking scorpion aspect warriors, and I didn't know what any of that meant, but it sounded fascinating. It was really very well done. Because
Yeah, and you've remembered that entire phrase like so much later.
Sticks in the mind. What does that mean? What is an aspect warrior? Why is that? It's an unusual thing to do. How do you? And I was trying to sort of piece it all together from the painting guides and the tactics articles and the little sidebars of background that you got, and we got more and more interested. So there came a point when I was sitting in my flat on a Friday night being late night shopping in Canberra, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to call my mate, the one I was played a lot of Blood Bowl with, and I'm going to ask if he wants to meet at the Logical Choice, which was our local games shop.
Uh-huh.
And because they're open for about another hour, so I'll give him a call and I'll ask him if he wants to meet there and go halves in a box set of Warhammer 40,000 Second Edition. And I'm reaching for the phone, and so the field of view is not doing us any favors here. So here's the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my hand. My hand is just about to close around the phone receiver when it rings.
Oh.
And I pick it up, and it's my mate who says, I've been thinking, Logical Choice is open for about another hour. Do you want to meet there and go halves in a box set of Warhammer 40,000 Second Edition? And it's like, yeah, right, okay, we're you can't not go through with it after that. That was a clear omen.
Yeah.
And I remember we bought the thing, and we lugged the box across to an all-night pancake restaurant not far from the shop. And we set up one of these big tables and spread all of the books and everything out. And I started with the Codex Imperialis, which I dug out as well. I've accessorized it carefully for this interview. And this is some of the stuff I was talking about. I think these photos appeared in the magazine as well. And
so cool.
Yeah, I think I even talked about this in the introduction to the omnibus. So just sort of that feeling of floating away. This was a setting and a whole feel, and I use the words feel and mood and so on for 40K a lot, because I think it's a very vibes driven setting. It's not a rigorous hard science fiction construction. It's a fever dream setting. It depends a lot on you buying into how it feels, and just that sense of and again, this is something else I'll probably keep coming back and saying a lot. The sense that this is not something the like of which I've come across before. So and then after that we were off.
Yeah, it's truly a unique setting, and it's so much more than, because my friend Ian kind of dragged me into it during lockdown, and I just didn't think it was for me, but it's so rich and varied. It's so big. It's sprawling, and there's something for everybody. But yeah, I really resonate. It's definitely a vibe thing, and the ability of the books in particular to change a mood and switch a mood on a dime. It's very powerful, considering it's all based around an IP of toy soldiers.
Yeah.
So did you have like a favorite legion, or what would be your go-to when you were playing? Do you remember?
The first thing I did, well, the box came with a lot of plastic Space Marines, so I ended up doing that. My friend got very into Tyranids, and we kind of, because the Tyranids were the new hotness at the time. The second edition Codex had just come out, and they had a completely different play style. And the Hive War for Epic had come out not long before that, and it wasn't just putting them into the game. I mean, the Tyranids had been around for a while, but the staged release of Hive War and then the Codex was what was introducing them into the setting.
Yeah.
So each one advanced the story of this new horrible threat sort of gnawing its way into the galaxy from the far end of the Ultima Segmentum a little
Yeah.
bit further. So and then so he brought up a lot of NIDs, and we tried a game. We didn't quite have the whole table dimensions things worked out, so we just played on my my table in my flat, which was way too narrow, which meant that my entire army was in charge range of his Hormagaunts on turn one. So that didn't last very long. But they were also in the at that point gearing up for the ICAR 4 campaign, and this is now, of course, part of the history. But at the time, so there was a thing in the NID Codex where that talked about the Ultramarines stamping out a gene stealer cult on this world, ICAR 4, and how the librarian reported having heard a psychic call emanating from the planet that had been cut off when they killed the Patriarch. And so at this point, the Imperium's just starting to work out exactly how all of this happens, and it's thinking, okay, something's coming for ICAR.
Yeah.
We need to be ready for. And then they threw in the big global campaign, all the NID players, and then all of the non-NID players piled in on the other side, and you could write up your results and send them in. So that was sort of the first bit of background writing I really did, was sort of doing trying to come up with a nice little narrative to tie a bunch of our Marines and Tyranid battles together. So that was my first go-to. But I tend to think that my favorite or most interesting faction in the setting is whichever one I've been reading about most recently.
Yes, yeah.
There's a way into all of them. There's a hook in everything. There's it doesn't take long if I'm reading about something for the writer brain to dig in and start sort of looking for things, looking for levers to pull and things to. The thing I sort of do most consistently is the worm's eye view trick, which is
that sounds interesting. And I'm really glad you mentioned your writer brain, because I really want to get in there. But yes, please first tell me about the worm brain view. That's so appropriate for 40K as well.
Not original to me. It was coined by a speaker at a writer's thing that I got taken to when I was a kid. But he was talking about poetry and the idea of looking at, say, a tree or a bush, and everyone's familiar with what a tree looks like, and then he says we often talk about then going and getting a bird's eye view as an alternative, but then the poet's job is to turn that on its head and come up with a worm's eye view. What does it look like from down among the roots? What does it look like? And he sort of riffed on it a bit from there. But the idea of finding turning something over and over until you find a perspective on it that's unique to yourself. And so that's a big part of getting the writer brain going, is trying to find the take on something or the angle into something that's not obvious, because that's generally the most interesting. And so, for example, when I was picking this up and flipping through it, the thing that came up. So if you look at the pictures, the Imperium stuff doesn't immediately launch into the military side. So I've got no idea how visible this is. Almost the first image we get is a guy. I mean, he's got a chainsaw, but he's a preacher, not a space marine or a guard commander or anything like that. And I've bookmarked a couple of spots.
I love this. Oh, that's so, do you know what? This is so lovely. You did some research for me. Thank you.
So the administratum, this picture, okay, this one here. Let me, and that is not a military picture. There's a space marine in it, but it's not a battlefield.
Yeah, you want to know what's going on in that story.
What's going on? There's these guys. They are walking along. One of them's actually got a smile on his face.
No, that can't be true.
And they're walking through some kind of cityscape. They don't particularly look look like they're under threat or anything. They are just sort of about their daily business, as is this guy, as is this guy. There's a, hang on a minute, I think this was actually the same picture. There was another one that I was looking for.
This is
Yeah, oh, there you
making,
go. It's a bigger,
this is making
it's a
so
bigger
much
version.
sense seeing your origin story like this.
And they were the things that the battle pictures were all very striking and everything, but those were the ones that made me think, okay, what's that like? And of course, the more you read about the society of the Imperium, and even in the sort of the very brief, sketched in ways, because the short stuff in the Codex went for maximum flavor in the minimum amount of time, so it was very evocative. And trying to work out picturing these guys, walking between buildings in some official precinct or through a marketplace or down the street, and what are they talking about, and what sort of bustle and voices are they hearing around them? What activity is going on around them? Is it people trying to sell things? Is it beggars or pilgrims or other officials, or I don't know, is it like an agora with people arguing politics or teaching philosophy under trees, or asking them for I don't know, but that was what was the writer brain got its hooks into.
Yeah.
And thinking about it takes something massive to supply all of these space marines and titans and huge tank columns and whatever. Think about the military calls the tooth to tail ratio, and the size of the culture and society that has to be able to feed a machine like that, and all those lives and all of that stuff that's going on under the surface and away from the spotlight. And that was really sort of drew in and started digesting.
I mean, this is just absolutely glorious to speak to you, because as you're taking me through this, I can imagine you and you're completely getting drawn in through these. And a lot of people talk about, the authors say, when we began, we were relying on flavor text amongst the rules. And I can see how you've been inveigled and drawn into this. But your world building, I mean, as you're speaking to me, wondering about, are there philosophers? We end up on Shira Calpurnia is gone to this planet, and we discover it at the same time as her. And there is so much going on this planet. So I'm just the interviewer is referring to her notes. So it's almost a tour of all the 40k like branches. Like it reminded me of Brazil. So the Inquisitors show up. We have the Navy, we have the Ecclesiasti, we have Adeptus Sororitas, we have the Mechanicum, and I was like, you're deliciously greedy. We're getting all these factions. Not only that, we get to see them clash, we get to see them interact, how they work alongside. That was very, very new for me. And yeah, and even the planet, like Hydrofer as a character, was so interesting. The different districts, the different people that habited it. And yeah, sorry, I quite often just tell authors what I think is good. So that's happening right now. I guess I have a few questions around this. One is, was it this delicious opportunity for you to explore everything and bring it all in? I mean, quite often we learn that authors are given a very specific brief by Black Library. So I guess, were you given a brief to fill? Or were you like, they were like, Matthew, we need a book. Like, how did that happen?
Okay, so there was a bit of back and forth about this. Shira Calpurnia was originally a Necromunda character.
Oh, wow.
So,
I did not know that. That's very cool.
so how far back along the timeline shall we go with this? Because
I mean, like, hit me up, because believe me, there are people who watch these videos who will be mad if we skip anything. So
okay, all right.
take me, I'm settling in, take me through.
Okay, so we've talked about what got me into the game as a player and a fan. What got me started writing was the There was a Games Workshop shop, the first one in Canberra, which is in a mall, a Westfield mall on the other side of town. I still somewhere have a big bag of old lead miniatures in their blister packs from the Games Workshop
Wow.
Belconnen grand opening in about 1995, which I still haven't opened yet.
They're probably worth a few bucks now, Matthew.
Probably. They did at one point, they did an in-house Necromunda campaign. And I said, well, hey, I write because I thought a little bit of ability and some ambitions to be a writer. Can I do something? Because the way that the game had been presented in White Dwarf and everything was, one of the things that you do for a campaign is you can do like a little newspaper of your settlement
Yeah.
or district covering the thing. And I said, hey, I can do stories for your newsletter if you want to do that. And they went, yeah, that's fine. So I would do each week I would do a little one-page micro story about something cool happening somewhere in the Underhive. There was a spider poacher, hunting spiders, or a pit slave rebellion, or this kind of thing. And then they would print them out and put them up on the notice board. And I was very stoked to find out that people would they'd spotted people going up to the notice board and just pulling aside all of the campaign updates and stuff and going straight to the story and standing there reading it and then going off again. And one of the late things in the campaign, they came up with this zombie king character who was like a nexus point for a plague zombie outburst. And so I wrote a little one-pager about an Adeptus Arbites commander further up the hive who had found out that something bad was going on and was on her way to an Adeptus Mechanicus shrine to talk about some biosamples they'd recovered to see what she was up against. And this was the scene that evolved into the opening scene of Crossfire, where she arrives at the...
Yes.
And the name I gave her was Shira Calpurnia, which is a name I'd had floating around in my head for a while, looking for a character to hang it on. So there were two of those little stories that had her in them, the zombie related ones. And yeah, she was a senior Arbites commander in Hive Primus. Things, time rolled on, and Games Workshop started up a magazine called Inferno, which they said it's going to be all fiction and artwork, no rules at all. It's just going to be a fiction magazine. And I remember thinking not being so much excited because, wow, this is a cool opportunity. It's like, oh shit, they're starting without me. How do I get in on this? And I grabbed the first issue as soon as it came out, and of course immediately went through looking for submission guidelines. And the first thing it had in it was, yes, you can send us stories. We are looking for viewers. Right, okay. And again, those mini stories I did for the campaign served me very well, because I sent a Warhammer Fantasy one at first, and which was silly because I didn't know the setting that well. And they said, okay, we don't mind this, try reworking it. So I sent the reworked one in, but then on an impulse, I grabbed one of the little Necromunda one pages and wrote an outline with that as the opening scene and sent that in. And I got thinking, look, we don't like the Warhammer one, but we love this Necromunda one. Can you write this for us? And that went on that was my first professional publication in the end. So then it went back. I did more stories for Inferno, and kept going back to the Necromunda ones. There were a couple that I pitched that didn't get up, but eventually I grabbed the Shira Calpurnia scene and came up with a thing with that. I ditched the whole Zombie King business and made it about getting caught up in horrible Hive Primus house politics and so forth. And they liked it. They commissioned it for a 9,000 word short story, and I have always had horrible trouble keeping to word limits.
You don't say.
Yep. And so I was used to going over, but this time something very different happened with this one. It went through a couple of iterations in the outline stage as a Necromunda story. I think from memory at the time, there was a move to sort of carve off Necromunda a little bit to see if they could. I think so. They could do things with Necromunda as its own IP without necessarily, like if a game maker or something, I think, came in to do something with Necromunda, they didn't want too much 40k stuff in there, so that they could handle them separately if they wanted to. This is, I think, what I seem to recall this being something in the air at the time. So we started looking around for somewhere else to situate it. This was when the Third War for Armageddon campaign was going on, and I remember there was some talk about, well, how about we put this into Armageddon just before the Orc invasion, which I wasn't keen on, because at the time I was already thinking this is a character I would actually like to write multiple stories about.
Yeah.
And if you do Armageddon, there's a hard timeline. We know that everything's going to get smashed to bits by Ghazghkull. I wanted something more open-ended. And so I fixed on Hydra Fur because I didn't know much about it. I actually subsequently clicked that it had had some mentions in one of the Barrington Bailey novels, so I had to go and sort of read that, and it dovetails with there's a couple of bits in Crossfire that dovetail with his writing once I knew about it.
Wow, awesome.
But all I knew was it was a world, it was a fortress world, an Imperial Navy stronghold. I liked the name. And it was, for my purposes, it was safely behind the battle lines. It wasn't a frontier world or a war-torn world. It was probably, in terms of external threats and military action, one of the safest places, most remotest places you could be in the Imperium. So it was perfect for what I wanted to do with studying how over 10,000 years of growth and collapse and stagnation and regrowth, how a society like the Imperium can sort of, ingrow on itself like a bad toenail, and what that feels like to grow up in the middle of. So I suggested Hydra Fur, and it really wanted to be longer than it was. I mean, I'm used to blowing past word limits more or less by accident, but this time it was like trying to stuff a cat into a box that was too small.
Yeah.
It kept bursting out, and every time it was kind of cool in a way, because instead of thinking, oh, how do I get to the end of this scene? How do I connect? It was obvious. I know how I get to the end, and oh, look, 3 more scenes and story beats that I hadn't thought about unfold so beautifully and naturally out of this that I can go and do those, and that's great. And then they lead naturally into this. It was amazing.
It's as if something was sent to you complete from the warp that kept building.
I had a much dorkier analogy in mind. It was there's a scene in the Goodies where they're homeless and they're just sleeping on park benches with newspapers over themselves for warmth. And Tim and Bill are both sort of trying to get one sheet of newspaper to cover them, and they're just not working, and it's all a bit sad. And then Graham just gets one newspaper and then unfolds it, and unfolds it again, 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 and ends up with this huge sort of king-sized blanket that he curls up in quite comfortably. And it was like that. It was like he just kept opening out all these new things from nowhere.
Matthew, thank you so much for the reference. I mean, goody, goody, gum, gum. That is a certain age demographic will love you for bringing that to the attention.
Absolute staple of weekday afternoons after school. Yep. And I remember then sitting down to send an email to Christian Dunn.
I just spoke to him 2 days ago, Matthew.
Right. How's he doing? Oh.
He's doing well, and I told him I was going to talk to you, and another person who sang your praises.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
He's off working for Asmodee, but it was great to hear about him having to edit. So I'm very interested, because now I've met Christian, and you're coming with this massive, massive overextended word count.
Yes.
So
right.
Please.
So he might remember this, because I sent him an email saying, look, I have finished the story. It's a little bit over. You asked me for 9,000 words, and it's 32,000 and change.
Okay.
So
good luck editing.
It's gonna take a little bit of cutting down, but look, and I promise you I will get on that once I've had a night's sleep. But I just wanted you to know that it is done.
Mm.
It's the story is finished, and I'm pretty happy with it. I just need to work out which third of it I'm going to hack out and send to you. And so I got a mail back from Christian saying, "Look, I've actually got like an 11-hour train trip coming up this weekend. Just send me the whole thing because I could do with something long to read." So
Perfect.
yeah, okay, I sent it off, and I wasn't really expecting anything to come of that. I sort of sat there, kind of exhausted, looking at this thing, trying to work out where to start. And while I was still working that out, I got an email back from Lindsay Priestley, who was the editor of the novels line at the time, saying, "I hear you have written this comically oversized short story for Inferno. Instead of cutting that back down to 9,000 words, how would you like to write it out to 90,000 words, and that can be your first book for us?" Which was which got me off the hook very nicely, and I signed on for that very happily. I
Wow.
later found out that they had I forget which one of them said this, but they were saying you'd done so much for Inferno at that point. We were all wondering why you hadn't pitched a novel to us already.
Oh, I love
Um,
that. They were just
so
waiting for you to, yeah.
apparently, so. And this was what ended up being it. So
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you, I mean, it sounds to me as I'm hearing you, I'm really hearing you got all it's kind of like the muse has visited you. You keep unfolding this magical, mythical newspaper. Is your background, did you study history? Because the way that I read you and the way that you're describing, it's almost like Tolkien built the world of like Middle Earth and the language. So yeah, so where does this come from? I'm going to call it like completist or just exploring every element and world building. Is that in your background, or is that just something that the Warhammer, that the Codex inspired you to want to write out and explore? Sorry, really long question. I hope you can make sense of that.
there's probably elements of a lot of that mixed in of all of those things. I did in fact study history. I did
I knew it. I could
was
tell.
my what my degree was in.
I love it.
Um,
You know, people who study history make great writers. Sorry, just putting that there.
well, the funny thing though is that in terms of actual research, I'm the laziest researcher you will ever meet. And I keep watching your interviews with Dan, and he says, "Oh, of course, I read. I got a mound of books this high on
Yeah.
Viking culture, it's on Napoleonic tactics," and I'm thinking, "Oh shit, I really ought to. I wish to have shown up." Uh, but no, I kind of, yeah, in terms of actually reading and researching directly for things, I tend to be really quite superficial about it, to be honest with you. But there was that thing about having the knowing the richness that was already there in the setting and wanting to add to it. And you talked about being greedy earlier on. You're bang on. I was thinking there's bits of the background here that, because remember this is 2003. The setting was a lot less developed. There hadn't been a full on role playing game. There hadn't been
Yeah.
the novel line was still in its infancy. Inferno was still really only a few years old. So yeah, I mean, part of my thinking was there's some stuff here where I can be the one to go and plant a flag there.
Mm.
That would be pretty cool. There was, yeah, partly just the joy of doing it for its own sake. I was the forever DM for my role playing group, so
Mm.
I got a lot more prep and planning time than I actually got playing time. So I was used to just putting this stuff together
Yeah.
for the fun of it. And in fact, hang on a second, I can see in my across the office here, I actually started a card file.
Oh my goodness.
I
I
think I've just
remember
about
card
emptied all of that out,
files.
so I don't know how much there is in here to show. Oh,
I'm also observing at the back of your room. This absolutely delights and makes me so happy because it's my wish that authors have a pin board with loads of ideas and maybe there's some red string on there. And you're showing me your card file, and I feel like I finally struck author gold. Like, this
I
is
have to.
so pleasing to me.
The strings are sort of an orange color.
This is,
That's basically a story tracker. You'll notice there's a couple of things being written, and everything else is in like concept and planning because
yes. Matthew, you're my author fantasy showing. You're telling me what I dream of being an author is really like.
So this is just me. Well, also because I'm finishing a big tranche of writing for another company at the moment,
Mm.
and so while I've been doing that, of course, everything just keeps backing up in the first two, and then they're starting to work their way around, and I had to. The idea is if I send something, it gets knocked back, it starts to circulate around. Actually, there's two of those I need to. There's some. A lot of those are short stories. There's
Wow.
some new horror markets that have opened up that I actually need to get those back out to.
Oof.
Yeah, so for example, there's a card for Bosporian Hive. There's a couple of characters in here. I thought I had actually thrown these out, to be honest. So
This
there's
is
one for Galata, which is Hydrophur's moon.
this is wonderful. And anyone who's watching, whoever says to me, ask the authors for any tips, like how do you start? This is a really fantastic technique. So each idea that Matthew's had around this world has its own card, which can then be expanded on. I can't believe
Yeah,
we're getting to see this with our own eyes, humans. This is
and
fantastic.
the nice thing about doing it in cards, and I like using filing cards for things, as you can see. The nice thing about doing it on cards is if you've got a little idea that pops up in passing and it's only 2 lines about something, you just put it on a card and throw it in there. And then you can just add to it as you come back and think of more, or you can cross-refer them. There's probably software that does this now, but I've never really used it. And then you can riffle through them and pull things out. And in fact, one of the and that one isn't in there. I don't know what happened to it, but there was one that purely a random passing idea, wrote out one for the Blind Tower,
Mm,
astropathic base, and a few bits and pieces. And that's a nice little touch that I might work in a reference to. But that, of course, became the setting for the third book.
love this.
Went back through, and went back through the cards, and that was one that jumped out at me. And that was the kind of thing that I was talking about being the forever DM, and that was the kind of thing I would do for game campaign settings as well, because it's easy to pull a card out and show it to a player and put it back.
Yeah.
It was something that was in the back of my mind through all of this. I already knew that it was going to be effectively a crime story, and it sort of it ends up being like
Yes.
a
That
crime political thriller kind of thing, and
that was sorry,
and
sorry
all
to
between
interject, but
humans.
that was something
Mm,
I noticed. Like it was a lot of like diplomacy with the different kind of factions, and then you
yeah,
chose a space policeman. Now I know what arbiters are because my friend Arbiter Ian, the police of the 40K galaxy. I thought that was a really interesting choice, and I remember when I was talking to Chris Wright, he any investigator's great because they get to go between these stratum of society. They're everywhere. So
yeah.
yeah, I really love that choice. Was that kind of some of your thinking?
That was part of it. She, as you say, she can go anywhere, and there was and in terms of world building and getting an insight into the Imperium, and again, this was something I talked about in the intro to the omnibus. The thing that was fascinating to me about the Imperium is the idea these people do not think the way that we think,
Hmm.
and their ideas about what justice even is, what the role of the law even
Hmm.
is, what obedience to the law means, what authority, the nature of authority, completely different from any kind of model that we've got. And one of I started did my degree in history. My minor was in philosophy, and I did a lot of units about the sort of development of theories of rights
Morals and
and
ethics.
legal theory and social contract and so on.
Yeah.
And so
Wow, Matthew,
the
you really are wearing your like personality and life experiences throughout these characters, and like that's why this world is so rich.
well, it all goes in there. There's another author I know talks about the cultural stash, which
Say
is
say again,
the big box in the cultural stash,
the cultural
and
stash.
that's the yeah, that
I'm
was her
making
term for
notes of
the
all these things.
yep,
Yeah.
uh, and that's like the think of a big trunk in your hindbrain that everything you see and hear and read gets stuffed into. I
Yeah.
always thought of it more like, did you ever do that experiment at in science class where you fill a beaker with hot water and keep dissolving salt crystals or something in there to get a super saturated solution, and then you put a pencil across the top with a string tied to it, and the salt crystal
Yes.
passes back out of the water, and you lift it out, and you've grown a
Yeah.
salt crystal. That's how that's
Oh,
the picture I always have of it. So everything that you're learning, and every film you see, every conversation you have, every history book you read, a news story, and everything like that, it all gets dumped into the big pool in the back of your mind, and it dissolves in there. And then when you find something that sparks you off, like um, a background sidebar in a Warhammer 40,000 rulebook, for example, you lower that in on the string, and then all this stuff that you've ever experienced starts to, if the molecules line up right, it crystallizes around that idea, and you draw it out, and you see what you've got. And
Matthew,
so,
you're going to make me cry. This is so gorgeous. I mean, one of my,
would you
I'm
like to
very,
take a minute?
I honestly, I'm like, I cry all the time on my channel. People are like, get on with it. But one of my greatest delights is talking to authors and trying to discover the muse and like really, the way that you
Right.
describe it is so beautiful. It's this amalgamation of everything we've learned coming out as gorgeous crystals. So, this is lovely. I'm just aware of the time, and I should ask this question because obviously Shira, I thought was a great character. Mira, Shira,
Oh,
very
yes.
happy with the name. In 2000, I mean, as a girl that kind of does YouTube on Warhammer, generally I'm
Mm.
really lucky, but there was I kind of took myself off the internet for 2 or 3 days when they announced that there were female custodies, for instance, you know? And in 2003, this is kind of not, this is not normal. Like, we don't have many female leads in the world of Warhammer. And
Not
yeah, so now I understand because Shira existed for your Necromunda for Inferno, and your games. Can you talk a little bit about, were there any challenges about writing a female character? How did that all sit when you came to kind of discuss and publish?
the process of arriving at her as a character.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
like I say, for a while, it was just a name that I liked,
Mm,
floating around, waiting to settle on, waiting to bump up against and adhere to a crystal.
yeah.
Um, because I liked the name Calpurnia, and I thought, okay, that's full of hard sounds, so you need a soft something with softer consonants and different vowel sounds. So I came with Shira, which I didn't realize was an actual name until very recently when I saw like Shira Haas, appearing in movies and things. But
Mm.
anyway, and actually, no, I did. She did get a mention in the first draft of Badlands Skelter's Downhive Monster Show. Not didn't appear as a character, but and then we took that up. But there was a side note from Mark Gascoigne saying, "Oh, great name though." So I thought, "Oh, right, okay, I'll keep that name and I'll think of something to use it for." And so then arriving at her as a character, it was part of that worm's eye view thing. It was part of, and again, you'll notice by now, I think in analogy. So it was
Mm.
part of that thing of going underneath and around and trying to find a different thing, or turning something over and over and over until I find the right grip for it. Or the other analogy I like to use is a slightly badly made key that you've got to sort of rattle around in the lock a bit until you feel the tumblers clicking into place and you can turn it. There's always a bit of that in the early part of a story.
Yeah.
While you wait, while you're trying to get everything lined up, and bits and pieces of it don't feel quite right, and you don't quite have your footing to get the thing going again. And so one of those things is always starting off messing with the character, and sort of it's like nowadays we've got this whole thing with computer games. It's like speed flipping through a whole lot of
Yes.
characters on the screen. Tall, short, heavily
Yeah.
built, different skin colors, different hairstyles, and so on. One of those is male, female, and I sort of messed around with the idea of an Arbitres character, and
Mm.
one of the things you do is, okay, and so if it's a female commander, and that just, I don't know, that was sort of when you felt some of those tumblers click into place. I was like, okay, yeah, actually, that feels like a good fit.
Yeah.
I don't know that there was anything much more
And then,
calculated about
well,
it than that.
I wondered actually, was she inspired by anyone around you or like any pop cultural female heroes of the time? And then the other question I had was, were you aware of any like negative response? I was just really interested as how Shira landed.
Okay. There was I can think of maybe a few who might have been. Now that I think about it, and I wasn't sitting there consciously at the time thinking, oh, I should do something like that film or that book
Yeah.
or whatever. I can think of people now. There was the series Law and Order: Criminal Intent. Catherine Erb's character in that, Detective Eames, who I
Okay,
suspect
yes.
was possibly a bit of an influence. And later on, I'm trying to get the chronology right because I think that series took off actually once Crossfire had come out. But I do remember saying to people, "Oh, look, if they ever did a movie, actually, Catherine Erb would probably be a good
Yeah.
choice because she's the right look." There's probably actually a bit of Clarice Starling in the mix there as well,
Oof.
um, because now, and it was a while before I saw the film of Silence of the Lambs, but I read the book not long after it came out,
Mm.
at
Yeah.
least once. And so there was quite a bit of that. There was a sort of the fish out of water because it's quite an element of the book that she's not quite at ease in the FBI.
Yeah.
Her small size, that her very sort of focused, sort of almost driven nature because of the expectation she feels on her. So there's probably an influence from there. Those are the ones I'm consciously aware of.
I mean,
Uh,
now you're saying that it's bringing to mind one of my favorite sequences in the book, and it's where Shira is contemplating the life that she's chosen leads her to be on different planets as she is sent,
mm,
and the feeling of never ever feeling at home on a planet with a different atmosphere, different sky,
yeah,
and that fish out of water thing. She was like a tough character, like there were emotions at play, but she was like determined, ballsy up front, and then very complicated emotions offset in the background that were unexpected. So I really, really enjoyed that as a character. Matthew, I can't believe we've been talking for an hour. Mate,
oh, okay,
we're gonna have to figure out, I'm gonna have to keep reading or figure out more excuses to talk to you.
okay.
Um, but I hate to come off this subject, but one thing I need to ask you about is, as you know, I'm going through the Heresy one book at a time. I think I'm
Mm.
around book 17, but you've written a Heresy story called, is it Vorax?
Yes.
So whereabouts will that fit in the Heresy? Because I want to make sure that I in
Oh, okay.
include you in my Heresy timeline in some way.
I think any time after Mechanicum.
Yay, okay.
It's a tiny story. It was actually done for an advent calendar, so it's a
Read
micro.
an
It's
advent
barely
calendar.
it is barely more than flash fiction. Um, and there were, let's see, yeah, because and it's the only one I've ever done that was explicitly tied in with an actual model.
Wow. Okay, I need to look up the model.
Because most of the time, I've been quite lucky. I've had a lot of freedom to, people say, "Oh, obviously they give you the catalog and you've got to write you've got to write something else." And I'm thinking, no, I've always been very free to, sort of, find where I wanted to go in the setting and everything. The one time was that, yeah, we were, and this was actually during a visit to Nottingham, and I forget who I was talking with, which is terrible. They're saying, "Hey, while you're here, look, we've got an advent calendar coming up, and here's what we've got going. And there's this thing called the Vorax, and if you could, find something quick to advent calendar length to do a little microfiction about the Vorax, that would be cool." And I went, "Yeah, all right, I'll see what I can do." And so, yeah, it's very small. It's on the Ring of Iron around Mars at a point where that's a horribly contested war zone,
Mhm.
denuded of life in a lot of places, and sort of sporadic guerrilla warfare and sniping and skirmishes going on through, a lot of it's just sort of no man's land and an empty space. So it doesn't really, it's its own little thing that doesn't connect to the heresy in any great detail. There's nothing narratively you're going to miss out on. Just probably any time after Mechanicum.
I mean, the
I'll
melancholy,
finish it in 10 minutes. It's tiny.
the melancholy of Mars after it was completely wiped out by those
Yeah.
factions. I was like, Jesus. So I look forward to probably a story without a happy ending that you wrote for a Christmas advent calendar. I'm really looking forward to. And yes, I can't believe all this time's gone. Matthew, so you're writing horror now, and do you still connect in with Black Library? Would you write more about Warhammer if you had the opportunity?
I'm still corresponding with them.
Yay.
Yeah. So it's not like I've.
I think in my experience, I've noticed a lot of authors that I'm interviewing from back in the Heresy. Now they're writing for so many different, projects or IPs, and some of them wander really far, some of them kind of wander, but they're still hand in hand. So yeah, it's good to know that you're aligned.
I'm I'm still moving around in that kind of space, and I'm still corresponding with them, and I have there's some particular things that I'm talking about, and there's some particular things that I have just in note form that I haven't, and none of which I'm is really in a condition for me to go into in any detail here, I'm afraid. But
Yeah, and also I've learned when you talk to anyone connected to Games Workshop or Black Library, they're like, I'm in NDAville, and if I will never speak of anything. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, what are they writing about? But I think it's really lovely, and when Dan was like, oh, Matthew is lovely, and he was like, oh, I need to write to him, and the fact that the authors all correspond and have this network and bounce ideas off each other, like that is, I think that's really special.
yeah, it's a good community. I mean, I'm a little bit on the end for it just by virtue of living on the other side of the planet, but it's always when I do visit the UK, yeah, a visit to Nottingham and a visit to stop by and see Dan and so on, and whoever else I can catch up with
Yeah.
is always a part of it. Yeah.
I mean, all roads lead to Nottingham. I should kind of close this interview down and be professional, but I just want to give some more praise because anyone who's about to read Crossfire as a result of watching this interview, within every chapter, Matthew has written it's a bit like the Advent calendar. There's a different religious festival every day, and it's obviously because it's Imperia, very strict rules and how they should go and what will happen on this day. And on one day, you're going to specially make your scourges and put the blades in the straps that you're going to smash your back with. And I just thought that was, you had all this big plot going on, all the index cards going on, and yet you had time for at least 12 different days of festivals. So I just wanted to say, this world building is magnificent. And you sharing that you were a student of philosophy and history really makes sense. But did you really love making up those magical
Oh,
festivals?
that was a lot of fun. Yeah, and again, I can point you to somewhere in here. I'm going to use up even more of your time now.
I
There's
love
one
it.
of these. One of the sidebars somewhere in here is probably in the ecclesiarchy section.
I love it. I have a hobby where we're like, let's look in the Ecclesiastes section. That's just, what we do.
Yep. Sidebar. So, page 39 of the Codex. On the day of affirmation, it is the custom to light a candle, small and sweetly scented, and while it burns, to silently think on those days so long ago. For a few minutes every year, the whole universe of mankind falls silent and bends its mind to one purpose, billions of souls drawn together in memory of the great confessor, from Dolan Carosius in the Ministorum Libramate.
I love that.
So, there was, so again, and it's so evocative. and then later on, sort of Gav went back and said, okay, who was Dolan Carosius? This was his actual story, and built on all of that, of course. But even without any of that, just those little touches, dropping in those names, just the hints at something so much bigger and broader and deeper and so forth. And that's what was going on, and going forward, deliberately dropping in names that weren't elaborated on anywhere else, because just the reference shows that this is something that anybody in the universe would immediately know about. And so there's all of this. There's a way that, if you're lucky, sort of life kind of falls into place around what you're writing. Dan calls this the library angel, putting along. And while I was writing this, and I was trying to come up with nice little touches and how to get into the mindset and write out what was going on around the cathedral, and turned on the TV, and it happened to be a documentary about a major religious festival, which included fasting and scourging and assembling temples and parades and what each event on the festive calendar meant and why it was, and so on. And it was and I didn't map it directly point for point onto the thing, but it's just there was a bit of that with Crossfire, actually. It was
Yeah, fabulous. Well, Matthew, thank you. You've given me writer brain. You've given me worm's eye view. You've given me tooth to tail ratios. You've given me cultural stashes, which lead to thought crystals and library angels. And it's my birthday in 49 minutes. And what the best
Shira.
gift of all time. I'm so glad we got to connect. This is like, I feel I've been working up to this, and thank you for being so generous with sharing all. I'm an analogy thinker, so I feel like I've really bonded with you, and I'm very, very grateful for you sharing your brain with me.
You're very welcome. In fact, I had more to say. I'm aware, though, that it's it's only just gone 10 my time, so it's getting very late where you are.
It is, but maybe sadly I'm gonna have to wind down now, but maybe you and we'll chat after we do our official goodbye here and see when we can next meet, because I'm sure we can find loads of stuff to talk about. So I will do the official.
To the
Matthew,
official.
thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything that you're working on you'd like to tell people about, or the social media, or any way people could follow or support you?
Uh, I've kind of fallen off social media. I have a very old cobwebby blog, which I keep meaning to resurrect and post something to again, and keep not doing it. Um, I'm on I'm on Mastodon, which not many people are. So yeah, I'm not terribly. I need to rethink my social media thing. That's a
I think
that's a
that
very climactic note to end on, isn't it?
Well, I think
Quick,
it's probably a really healthy
something with
note. Look, if someone as wonderful as Matthew doesn't need social media, you don't either. But please do seek him out on Mastodon just to say how fabulous you think his writing is.
you very
And
much. I would love to. I was sort of ready for the "What are you working on now?" question, and it's something I'm doing. Like I said, it's I'm just finishing up a big chunk of writing. I've had a ton of fun doing it. It's it is not for Games Workshop. I would love to be able to talk more about it. I'm not sure if I should, because I haven't been able to confirm. So I will leave it at that for now, and then maybe at another point I can get into it.
yeah, well, how about I have an idea, so let's do an official goodbye, and we'll talk about my idea
We'll do
afterwards.
that. We'll do the official goodbye.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you here again.
Hopefully. Thank you. I look forward to it.
Take care. Bye.